Hey everyone, welcome to the 237th episode of Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by our new patron, Liam Devine. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we've got the directors behind Save Yourselves, a new indie feature starring Sunita Mani and John Paul Reynolds. The directors are Alex Huston Fischer and Eleanor Wilson. They're not only creative partners, but partners in real life as well.
We have a
TMI. I know. Look at that. Yeah, it's our first couple in a while, so we thought they'd be a really interesting duo. We also don't often talk to co-directors, which is a unique thing for us. Save Yourselves is super fun. It's kind of a genre mash of a rom-com plus a sci-fi. We have a really good conversation about the nature of collaboration, the nature of art reflecting life in certain circumstances, and also just how you go about combining two seemingly disparate genres and ideas to make one new cool thing.
Yeah, it's awesome, and the movie's really awesome. And yeah, so I knew like nothing about the movie before I watched it, other than that it had played at Sundance. And sometimes it's really fun to watch movies like that. So I recommend you check it out. But before we talk to Alex and Eleanor, Matt, I'm dying to know, what have you been working on lately?
Yeah, man, I'm back to work, which has been really nice. I'm writing and directing a new set of spots that shoot super darn soon. I got hired last Thursday. We were going to shoot this Friday. We just pushed it to this Monday.
And you're shooting in person, like you're going to be on a set?
I'm going to be on a set for the first time in months. I'm both looking forward to it and dreading it a little bit, but because this is with some very high profile talent and therefore had to be SAG, and there were a lot of extra precautions taken around it, and everything is outdoors, I felt much more comfortable with the idea.
Because you're saying the SAG thing is making you feel like the rules will be followed more closely?
Yeah, and that people are required to submit their plans to SAG for them to sign off on as well. So basically, any sort of union, I think, has a pretty high standard in terms of testing and, requirements around, COVID managers and things like that. So just knowing that there was like a black and white, tried and true, tested plan that we would have to implement rather than winging it a little bit. Not that anyone on this team would do that, but just knowing that there was something that other productions were doing and a set of standards basically with which to follow, rather than, just going off of hunches or inclinations,
Yeah.
Like if I was
I'm
like,
more of a hunch man.
I read in the New York Times that we shouldn't do this,
No,
I saw on Facebook
you have
that
to
we
read on Twitter.
shouldn't do that. Right, exactly.
Andy Slavitt, whatever he says, I'll do.
Yeah, exactly. So that made me feel a little more at ease with everything. And like I said, because I'm writing them, I could write them to, be really thoughtful about those precautions.
Yes, you're like, a man stands alone in a giant field.
Yeah, exactly. Long lens.
Why are you shooting on a Monday? I guess that traditional idea of like shooting in the middle of the week for a one-day shoot for equipment purposes, pick up, drop off, does that affect you?
It's really because when you're shooting with super fancy talent, their schedule is what dictates everything else, basically.
So does that mean you're going to get all your gear on Friday and then just keep it over the weekend?
Potentially, yeah.
And do you have your whole crew together?
No. So it also, an additional wrinkle is that we are shooting out of town. So we'll be traveling. And so the cost of traveling people has become a much bigger concern because of the cost of traveling people just as tricky. Plus, COVID, basically all of those precautions are extra on top of what would normally be like a solid, healthy budget, but is like now a little more strapped, basically.
Yeah, everyone's like adding on these COVID surcharges. I was budgeting something for someone and they're like, yeah, you gotta like sanitizer, masks, all these things, like space. You need extra tables for lunch because people are sitting like two to a table. Even my pediatrician, my kid's pediatrician, charged me an extra $15 for COVID stuff.
Yeah. Gloves are expensive, Oren. Haven't you heard?
Are you spending the night there?
I will be spending the night there, yeah.
Oh, in wherever you're shooting? Like that
Correct,
city?
Yes.
At a hotel?
Will be at a hotel, yes.
Oh, but it's a one-day shoot.
Correct, that's true. It's a far enough drive that it's out of the zone, the TMZ, as it were. And we'll also have a build/prep day. So I'll drive down. I'll have 2 nights there, basically, which will be nice.
I think my guess is that we haven't talked about what the TMZ is, probably in over 100 episodes. Can you just give us a quick, for our newer listeners that are not Hollywood insiders, can you let them know what the famous TV news organization, TMZ?
Mm-hmm. Hold on, let me go get my big gulp or whatever it is he drinks out of. So the TMZ, the reason that famous news website is named the TMZ is because the TMZ refers to the 30-mile zone, which is the kind of strange map that we use for filmmakers to determine whether or not someone has to spend the night somewhere else, basically. So if you were within the 30-mile zone, then it is legal and permissible to ask crew members and actors in particular to drive to location. If they're beyond the 30-mile zone, then you have to put them up somewhere. Right. So the TMZ refers to the zone in which Hollywood people tend to be, basically.
Right. So on the north end, it's like Santa Clarita, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley. And on the south end, it's like Seal Beach, Long Beach, Fullerton, Anaheim, kind of northern Orange County.
So if I wanted to shoot in southern Orange County with a SAG actor, they would have to spend the night before the shoot.
Yeah, I've done it on non-union shoots too. Not the spending the night, but the interesting thing is like I've shot in Wrightwood and Palmdale and places like that, Victorville and Lake Arrowhead. You have to, even if people are driving themselves on the day of the shoot, usually, let's say your call time is 8 a.m., that you get to set at 8 a.m. and that's when your time card starts and that's when you start getting paid technically. But if your location is outside of this 30-mile zone, then you start getting paid the minute your car passes the edge of that 30-mile zone. So let's say you're shooting in Wrightwood and it's like half an hour outside of the zone. You have to account for that half an hour drive on both ends and you lose an hour of your actual workday. So kind of fascinating, or not at all if you don't care about shooting in California. But so you are shooting in California. You're just shooting outside of the 30-mile zone. You're going to spend 2 nights in a hotel. Mm-hmm. Wow, Matt, it's big for you.
I know. I am excited, though. I have not left my apartment in 45 years. So yes. I'm excited to see how the world has changed.
Yeah. Cool. And you're writing these too. How many spots are you writing? And how much is like the agency or the production company involved in the scripting?
They've been really collaborative. It's for 20-ish second spots. They're all digital. So there's latitude there. They could be as short as 15 or as long as 30. But we're trying to keep them simple more because we have time constraints with the talent. So 4 of those and then 2 teasers on top of that won't be talent specific. It's been super fun. It's
like, did they send you a list of ideas and then you wrote scripts based on those?
Yeah. I mean, so they're Halloween themed and they're with, I guess I can say an athlete with a specific sport. And so you
ping
can
pong,
say,
I'm assuming?
Yeah, so if it's ping pong and Halloween, then, that's 4 spots where it's like, okay, well, let's do one where
he's giving out paddles for trick-or-treaters.
Right, exactly. Or he's using his ping pong paddle to hit the candy into each of the kids', trick-or-treat buckets or whatever. Like that. So they kind of write themselves. They get pretty straightforward.
Kids have to jump over a net. And if they touch it, they have to do it again.
Right, exactly. So you get the iconography and the game relatively quickly. And so you can kind of like, my job is mostly in how to craft a solid punchline or how to heighten. And they can say things like, oh, what if we did a thing with lawn decorations? So it's actually it's been fun and fulfilling and pretty straightforward because I think the quote unquote game of how to craft them is pretty clear.
And do you study like this athlete's specific personality or study his other work to see kind of...
There were a few... Well, he was clear about like with Halloween, like where the line was for him in terms of like gore or scares or anything like that. And so we're keeping them, pretty wholesome and pretty fun and pretty grounded.
It's kind of like Lovecraft Country / The Boys level. Mm-hmm. Maybe a little Game of Thrones, but nothing too gory.
Yeah, the blood buckets are flowing. No, it's much more. I keep talking about the scene in E.T. where they go trick-or-treating as like a touch point of like suburban, wholesome, eclectic, down-to-earth Halloween.
Right. And is there any acknowledgement whatsoever of the fact that many kids will not be trick-or-treating this year?
That is not acknowledged. However, we will have some kids wearing masks. And
oh, because it's Halloween?
Yeah, no medical masks, which is interesting because I kind of was like, well, if every kid is dressed up as a doctor, a wolf man or a doctor or a ninja, then their faces are covered. That should be good, right? Or do we want to explicitly show that we are in fact wearing masks? And so I think the latter is where we're going with it, actually, to show that we're being conscientious about it in front of the screen as well as behind.
Interesting. Mask believer, mask denier. You're all welcome here at this house. Cool. Before we hop into our interview, I just want to remind people real quick, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/justshootitpod. It's going awesome. You should join in. Get a hat. I'm going to mail out a hat today to Maddie Delk, which I'm very excited about because I always love an excuse to leave my house. Anyway, check it out. Patreon.com/justshootitpod. You can give $1, $4, $10, $4,000, whatever really you feel like you want to give right now.
And all of the above, I think, are totally appropriate.
Just as long as it's a DGA minimum for patronage, we'd appreciate that. And for $10, we'll send you a hat, a Just Shoot It hat, which I've made. I'm going to wear my Just Shoot It hat from now on. I've been not wearing it because I think it's like weird to wear your own stuff like on set, but I feel like I should wear it because then people on set will know about our podcast.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm encouraging you to wear yours for your shoot.
We'll see.
It goes great with a face shield.
A face shield plus mask.
Yeah.
I'm going to be wearing goggles as well.
Good. And a bubble suit.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's talk to Eleanor and Alex. I know you all are going to like this conversation. So Save Yourselves is a movie about a couple, a Brooklynite couple who is addicted to technology like the rest of us. And it's depicted so perfectly. I think it was. I was kind of busy looking at my phone during the movie. But trying to go off the grid, get away, and turn everything off. And it happens to be during an alien attack on Earth. So they're caught a little bit unknowing of what the hell is going on.
They're behind the curve of the rest of society because they're not plugged into anything.
And so it's about them kind of figuring out what's going on and ostensibly watching their relationship grow as it's being challenged in this way.
There you go. Yeah. That's pretty good.
Pitch perfect, especially the part, the joke in the middle where you said you hadn't really watched it because you were busy on your phone.
We added that into the log line. We will from now on.
Thanks. And I love the poster. It's one of those posters that at first you don't realize there's like a joke in there. And then once you've seen the movie or you've seen the trailer and you look a little more carefully at the poster, you realize, oh, wait, that's a very fuzzy Earth.
Yeah.
So your movie is much like The Matrix in that the less you know,
Yeah, there were some people who went to early test screenings who had no idea what they were in for. They were like the plus one of a friend of a friend or something, and were kind of disappointed when it wasn't just a rom-com.
And like you said, we wanted it to feel like a rom-com that gets taken over by a sci-fi plot, and there are some people who just wished it remained a rom-com
never changed.
And were not interested at all in the science fiction part of it.
Who would be bothered by sci-fi in a rom-com?
It's like 1 out of every 10 people is just like, oh, I like the characters and I would have just watched them.
And we were like, where did you think that was going to go? I mean,
funny because I was like, oh, this is kind of like if you took an episode of High Maintenance and mixed it with Black Mirror, right? And some people are like, yeah, that show's not for me, you know.
Exactly.
So that's the answer.
I felt like what's good about the movie is that the characters are really committed and are really funny all the way through. And I was actually curious about the tone. I feel like there's probably this tendency once aliens attack Earth and shit is getting real.
You want to go zany a little bit or maybe
serious.
More serious, sure. Yeah,
but,
like a little more Independence Day or something. Yeah.
Yeah. But the levity of their relationship never really goes away, which I do think feels real to me.
Yeah, the stakes are still almost always about their relationship and not quite as much about whether they live or die.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to always sort of like keep it fun and funny, I guess, throughout the whole thing. Like we think of it more of a comedy than anything else. I think if you go into it thinking you're about to watch a sci-fi movie, you might be a little bit disappointed because it never really, fully, I guess it does sort of go there at the end, but we try and sort of turn all the sci-fi tropes on their head and actually, I guess, disappoint in that, deliberately disappoint in that way that it's like they're never really going to find out what's going on. We're never going to know what's happening with these aliens, and they're not going to succeed, really.
We talked a lot about the tone remaining intact when like halfway through the movie things start to get very crazy. And it was like a combination of what are the things that happen to them, how do we show them, and keeping them honest on how they react to stuff was like where all the sense of humor came from. And I think that also made it more grounded. And then through the editing, it was just like also maintaining that. It's just like throughout the whole process, that was just an ongoing conversation about how to maintain that. So I'm glad you think so.
Yeah, there's really only a couple moments where we sort of like allow it to have like a serious moment, but I think it's like you can have a couple of those. If you have too many of those, then
as long as they're
like,
followed by a laugh, it's okay.
Right,
yeah. And I think kind of even if they are, it's not like the characters aren't serious, but if they're reactions, like there's the part where Jack, where he's just like, what the fuck, like, and he's serious and he's scared and everything, but it feels so real, like how one of us would react to the situation, that there's some, it's funny too, That was one where we were just like, okay, this is the moment where you can go as big as possible.
Yeah, right.
And he always plays everything, like we love them so much because they play everything very real, but we let him go. We were like
bananas in that moment.
Go huge. It's one of our favorite moments.
Well, I want to go back actually to Oren's initial question of what came first, right? In terms of the development of the idea, right? You've got the genre mash. Did you come at it from a point of sci-fi or from a point of like a rom-com relationship sort of movie?
Well, in terms of the log line, like that was really it. It was always both things together, the couple go off the grid.
The log line is what Eleanor came up with first.
Right. It was just like a silly idea that I prior to this wasn't really making comedies. I was making serious dramatic short films. And I had this sort of funny idea that I was like, I'm probably never going to make this. And then I told Alex about it and he thought it was funny. And we were like just kind of riffing on it. And we're like, oh, this actually could maybe be kind of fun. Like maybe it'll just be a fun experiment to write together. And then it just snowballed fortuitously into what it is now. But
it was always ingrained. It was always both. The appeal was always doing both.
Right.
Yeah. Showing off the grid and during an alien invasion.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like letting your imagination go with like what would actually happen to us, like how would we handle this? And it's a thing that we, I guess, think about a lot. Just in life, it seems like the world is falling apart, and it's like, how are we going to handle this when
there's earthquakes,
when the shit really goes down?
Oh yeah, welcome to California, by the
way. Thanks, So it was a lot of just imagining that stuff, and the comedy kind of came from that.
Right.
Yeah.
Obviously, it resonates with what's going on today, but I'm sure we've all heard the stories of like the Big Brother cast that didn't know about COVID, or the person that was off in the woods for 60 days and then
Jared
back.
Leto.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
It's weird that stuff is happening.
We got a lot of texts the day that Jared Leto came back and tweeted that he was at a meditation retreat.
Yeah, I think someone even commented on the trailer, did they just copy Jared Leto's story? And it's like, do you not know how films work? We obviously didn't make that happen
like,
in 3 months.
Right, but did you copy his story?
Yeah, we did.
We thought it was such a good idea for a movie that it happened, and then we wrote it, and then we went back in time
to Sundance.
To get it in time for Sundance.
Well,
you can do that.
It's pretty cool.
So one of the reasons I like the movie is because we talked about the genre mashing, and it is very easy to make like a bad version of this movie. At the end of the day, it's two people in a house, which already sounds horrible.
Yeah, we've all seen many versions of that movie. There were some cool shots, guys. Really, congratulate you made a movie.
But somehow a movie that's largely based on two people. I know in the opening act there's a lot more people and there's some voicemails and things, but primarily, probably 95% of the time, it's two people. But there's never a moment that it feels small. And there's always this real kind of idea of scope, and they're going all over New York, and a lot of stuff is happening. Can you talk a little bit about whether that, like when you realized you're going to write the script and try to make this movie, was that part of the plan how do you make it feel big but keep it small?
I mean, I guess that was always like a conversation that we were talking about as well. Like, I mean, truly, like you say, they're in 95% of the movie. They're actually in 100% of the movie. They're in every scene. I mean, and it was like a thing that we always were like a little kind of nervous about. So like, how do we make this just not insufferable? That just watching these people, a huge part of that is the casting. I think
them being so good.
They are naturally really funny and charming. So we just knew that we had to nail that really, and we're very particular about that.
It was another thing that was just throughout the whole process. There was like a lot of dialogue. We cut down dialogue in the script, and then when we shot it, we cut it down a little bit more. And when we cut with the movie, we cut out more of it. It's just like making them as palatable as possible, and then in the end, it's good. But for a while, it's like,
there's a long time that it wasn't good.
And when you say palatable, do you mean that the characters were too quippy, too sarcastic, too negative, all of it?
All that stuff. You just refine like moments, and then eventually it's correct.
I do think there's this tendency of like the first cut of a feature film, especially like this is an independent film, right? I mean, I know you have Kesha. Some big companies attached, but I think there is this tendency for the first cut to feel like it's the same scene over and over, right? Like there's kind of some redundancy or like pacing that feels the same. And a lot of times I think it has to do with like your temp music that you pick that you like fall in love with and just try in every scene. And it takes like a lot of work in post to like squash and stretch things to make a movie feel dynamic.
Totally. Yeah, we did cut some scenes that were like, there's this whole scene in the beginning where they lay out their plan and they're like, okay, no phones, no laptops, and when we, kind of put it all together, we were like, you don't actually need to say this. The point is gotten, so we just took it out.
We put one thing back in the trailer actually.
That's right.
To make the trailer clear.
That was really useful for the trailer actually. Yeah, we use that there.
Phones,
but
that is a good tidbit. You should, every time you make a movie, even if there's a scene that's very on the nose, but it does describe the plot or the setup of the movie, maybe just shoot it for the trailer.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I mean, there was a few things like that we sort of learned along the way, because the movie is, for all its kind of silliness or whatever, it is rather plotty. Like there's, every scene kind of something happens that leads to something else. And that was one thing in the edit that we noticed. There was an early scene that we ended up cutting just because it was boring, but it had what we thought was a really important piece of information in it that it turned out to not be that important. But one thing we thought, like, coming out of this was like, if there's a important piece of information that you really care about, you should put it in 2 scenes just in case one of them sucks. And needs to
did Lucy give us that advice?
No, Lucy's advice was about, Lucy's our script supervisor. Her advice was, because there were a few things where we just wanted to do, like a 1 or 2 page scene in one shot, like one wide shot or whatever. And her good advice was always like shoot a shorter version of it if you're going to do that as well.
Because you're committed.
Always what? Shoot a shorter version?
Yeah, do a version of the scene that's like half
the dialogue,
or less of the amount of dialogue. Because when you get to the edit, you don't know what the pacing is going to be like.
We just shoot everything in 16K, reframe. It's fine.
Right.
Well, but what I love about that piece of advice, though, is the other version that you hear is like, oh, shoot an insert or like get a couple close-ups or whatever. And then what ends up happening is that scene that is really beautiful and like would make sense as a oneer is kind of, becomes really cutty because you're cutting around the dialogue that you realize you don't need in the first place. But shooting the short version of it still, it preserves the point that you were trying to make in a more of a concise way without like cutting to somebody's hands or something dumb,
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't even think about that, but that is so much better advice that she said, rather than saying like get a close up of a frog.
That actually does make me think of one scene in your movie now that you said it. And I wonder if it's this scene, but it all plays out in one beautiful shot, in my opinion, of when Jack is sitting at the computer and Sue is on the phone telling everyone her plans of going off the grid. And Jack, we more or less see his mouth the whole time, but Sue's kind of spinning around and talking. And clearly you couldn't have recorded both of them saying all those things at the same time because they both have these fully formed conversations right next to each other.
We did, actually. We did. I think that was just the audio from the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
We did. Yeah. We did.
Yeah. That was actually, John, because basically the more important part of that dialogue is what Sue's saying, that she's like sort of, telling her boss that she can't come in next week. And so John was just like quite masterful with like inserting his like little bits just like in quiet moments, and it kind of just worked. We were concerned about that on the day, actually, that it was going to be a problem, but it turned out fine, and we didn't have to ADR any of that, actually.
No.
It was a surprise. Sometimes things that you think are going to be the hardest things just end up working out.
They were masters at these little details about
technical stuff
about acting. So like modulating their voice to be louder or quieter. In that scene, John would say stuff quieter and fit it into the gaps of Sunitha talking. And the other thing they did was they were like incredible at their own hands and their gestures, continuity wise.
Yeah.
And that's another thing Lucy told us. She was just like, they're really nailing it with the gestures.
That's the result of them both being on series for a while? Like, is it just experience?
I would say so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably.
I mean, TV definitely hammers that kind of stuff into you, like just being aware of the camera and the like technical needs of a performance.
I had a friend that's, I consider him to be a really good actor, and we were shooting this video that I made, many years ago, a CPR training video, and there was like this little dramatic point, and he was just a guy in a classroom, and I noticed in one take, in like a closer shot, he like kind of scratched his head a little bit, and then kind of grabbed his pencil and tapped it, whatever. He did something really small, and I went to him and I was like, Joe, I noticed you're doing this thing. Don't do too much random stuff, because if we want to cut from the wide shot to the close, it's not going to match. He's like, oh no, I've been doing it. It's like, okay, really? Every take you've been kind of scratching your head. It just looked so natural, like an instinctual. And he's like, yeah, what I do is like in the first take, or first or second take, I'll just kind of do whatever feels natural, whatever I would really do. And then if it seems like we're moving on, then I'll just do that same thing, and I'll kind of clock when I'm doing it and everything. So he's kind of finding it in the scene, but then he's remembering it for the coverage, which I thought, oh, that's cool.
He's keeping track of what takes are good based on your reaction to the to the shot.
Yeah, just from the transitions from like a wider shot to, a tighter shot. But
they do so much for us, the actors.
I mean, that's why, and this is, Matt and I both work primarily in commercials recently, and it's sometimes it seems as if producers don't quite realize that the actors are like so important to making a good thing. And like you talk about these specifics, like when the actors are worried about that and you're not worried about it, you can worry about like the crooked picture in the background or the art direction or camera move or something else. So it's just amazing to work with like such great cast.
Exactly. And in commercials you have like they're like they do it a couple times after you wait for 8 hours, they do a couple takes.
Yeah, right.
And then
get it right.
And also there's this logic in commercials where like, you know what, we looked at the SAG numbers, it's just going to be too expensive. It's way cheaper to do it non-SAG. Who knew? Let's just use non-union actors. And you're like, well,
all right, we're blowing all this money on everything else.
Commercial's not going to be good, but okay.
That's how Oren wins all of his jobs.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, it'll be bad if you don't do this.
Like, it's fine.
Back to Save Yourselves, though. I'm curious about production a little bit, right? Because it all most of it, I should say, takes place upstate. It feels like it's a small cast, it's an independent movie. It feels like one of those movies that you watch and you're like, oh, I bet that was pretty fun to make. Tell us, what did you feel like in retrospect, what made it fun, or maybe how could you impart some advice to people who would love to have that sort of experience?
Yeah, we got very lucky with kind of everyone involved, I think was the secret, if that is a secret. But I mean, from the producers, down to the PAs, like everyone was just really cool people. And I think for us, it was like having come from like short films and music videos and like very, very small crews, we kind of knew that going into our first feature, the ideal situation would be to keep it somewhat small. Like obviously when you're working for more days on end, you need more people to sort of sustain the level of energy that you need for that kind of thing.
What numbers wise, what does that mean to you?
Crew size? Yeah, we had, I think it was like, on the biggest days, it was like 30 people, but like
usually 25.
Yeah, it was like maybe just
22
or something on the smaller cabin days. It was, that was pretty.
One and one in a swing. Was that?
Oh yeah, sure. Like if you're talking about exactly.
And then like department heads, and then you're full basically.
Yeah, department heads, and just really, really good production team. Like
great locations, right? You have this house that's like half windows, so you probably plan out what time of day to shoot what scene, and you have a lot of natural light
We would have liked to have done it in that manner, but it was mostly shot around the weather because it was raining so much.
The forecast was rain for every single day, and it would maybe rain or not rain.
And it was sort of like a problem for exteriors and interiors because of the sound. So we changed the schedule every single day.
Constantly.
Like it was our poor AD was just like the night before each next shoot day, just like, I think, like looking at the way it is right now, I think we can do this here and and thankfully like the actors were really like very flexible on that.
At least they're all available.
Yeah, it was,
right. That's the thing about having two people. It's not like, oh man, we got to call so and so. You know, like,
totally.
We locked them in.
That was thankful. Really the weather was the only like really challenging part, but we just had such a wonderful group of people who, I don't know, like everyone seemed to be like pretty invested in the script, which was cool, and everyone got along very well, and especially like the actors and the crew together got along really well. And I think just being in that kind of like one location, even though, you know, we're in the woods and different things at times, like we were all staying upstate together, and it sort of sets up this nice,
we were up in Woodstock,
summer
and
camp vibes.
Summer camp vibes for sure. And we had like, you know, the camera team had a house, and the art department team had, like, everybody had a house. And we were very...
Yeah, Woodstock, there aren't any hotels.
Yeah.
Like literally.
Yeah.
Right?
There was like one. And
There's one hotel that we put up, like our day players, like for a couple of things.
So it's all Airbnbs or whatever.
Yeah. But it was really, it was just nice vibes. And, you know, I think a lot of that, like I was saying, is our line producer was really fantastic.
Tatiana Bears.
She's high recommend. I mean, just it's such a, I used to line produce and still do commercials sometimes, so I know the job, and it's like so integral that the crew trust the line producer, and
they not only trusted her, they love her.
Yeah, right.
they like really respect and are friends and became friends if they didn't know her by then.
So I think like she really set a great tone for us, and you know, like we actively try to set a good tone on set each day, even in amongst like, you know, of course it's like stressful at times, but that's certainly something that like I always think about in every
Well, can we
project.
dig into that just a little bit, like how you two, so you're both directors in your own right, you know, and I know you come from different backgrounds, like tonally, how did you guys work on set? What was the split of decision making, and how did that go?
We did everything together.
Yeah, we did. There was one day where we just had just such an insane page count, and like special.
Sorry, what's an insane page count?
Oh, it was like an 8-page day, I think, that also included,
we can't say one of the
special
things.
effects, one thing that we can't talk about, and stunts, and I mean it was just like I don't know
And
what
it was
happened.
a big day.
It was a big day.
It was the emotional core. It was a moment in the movie. There were two moments in the movie that were like real dramatic moments, and both of those happened on the same day.
Right. So that day we like sort of did a divide and conquer approach where I sort of worked with the actors and Alex worked with Matt, the DP, more. But aside from that, we basically tried to just both have a hand in everything. And
so you both would talk to the actors at the same time? You both talk to the crew at the same time? Or
yeah, I mean, I guess not always like that regimented, like, you know, join at the hip, like shuffle towards them and speak at the same time. But we, but in terms of like, there was no structure to like, you only talk to this department, you only talk to that department. It was a lot more kind of.
Were you ever worried about contradicting one another? Do you guys remember the second season of Project Greenlight? It was a duo of directors, and there's a great scene where like Shia is like sitting in a car. He's like, you know, 12 or however old he is in that movie. And like there's a moment where the camera crew watches one director come over on one side of the car and say one thing, and then that guy leaves, and the other guy comes around and says the exact opposite. And Shia just talks so much shit to the camera operator.
Was that when Amy Smart said like "fuck you" to the director or something?
Yes, it's that episode actually. Classic, you guys. But you know, like that's the nightmare scenario of what two co-directing situation.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
The issue that like maybe in the first week of shooting that we realized we had to like figure out was going to say the same thing to the actors, both not realizing that one of us had already said the exact same thing.
They're
and
like, we got it.
Yeah, exactly. So just not
do you
annoy
ever
them.
something I kind of think about when I've co-directed a little bit, and there can be this thing where you're like, well, I kind of think we should do it like this, and the other person's like, well, I kind of think what if we do it a little differently? And then you're like, well, let's just get both versions.
Honestly, like our biggest, like, I mean, that was probably like a fear going into it. And, you know, Alex and I like live in fear at all times. And I think we did a lot of preparation to avoid that, you know, like,
Did you rehearse?
Sort of.
with the
I rehearse how to direct all the time.
Well, the idea, you have like a little like John pillow.
John, in this scene, we're gonna,
Eleanor, when you talk to John in this scene, I'd like you to hit that one direction a little harder.
Your pointing is a little weak.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, I thought that I wasn't a pointy director until we saw like photos from the set. And I was like, God damn it!
We're both pointing in different directions.
Why are we pointing so much?
Wait, what do you point for in directing? Like cameras? Like put the camera here or eye lines?
I have no
like,
idea.
You're gonna walk over there?
Pointing. There's some really funny pictures actually from like the location scout where every like photo that Alex and I are in, we're just pointing at something.
Different stuff. Yeah, it's very funny.
But no, we tried to just be very prepared. And you know, we're a couple, you know, at home you can't see, but we're sitting together in our home right now. And so
there's a piece of plexiglass between
for safety, of course. But yeah, so we, you know, there's a pretty blurry line between the end of the workday and the home life. So we do.
Can we talk about that a little bit? Not without getting too personal, but you're the first partnership that we've had of co-directors who are also together romantically. Was that fraught in any way? Was that complicated, or was it just perfect?
It's the first time I co-directed at all, let alone with a partner. And for me, it's very nice to have like someone else just in the process with you from the beginning to, you know, now still in the process with you, and kind of like who is as invested as you are. And in terms of it being, I don't know, I mean, I feel like the only, like, Alex has better boundaries than I do for sure, and is the one who will be like, it's 10 p.m. Stop talking about the movie.
Not on the shoot. On the shoot,
no. Yeah. The shoot was just like constant, but
it was like overwhelmingly an asset to have to be co-directing and then to be living together and all this stuff, because there's never enough time in a day. We got so on the same page, like between writing and pitching the movie and talking about the movie and working with the actors, that we were like basically completely aligned on performance and shots and things like that. Because we'd worked through everything in the script. Like there's certain things that you take for granted, and the other person's like, I don't get this. And you're like, what are you talking about? And then you have to like talk through it. And by the time you finish a script that you think is decent, you've talked through so much stuff.
Yeah. And I think also being a couple, there's like a base level like comfort, you know, between us, that like no one's going to get too offended if you say something like in the slightly wrong way or whatever, you know, like, or if you're like a little short about like the, you know, the way, I can't think of an example, but just like if I
don't like the idea,
if I like, we can just sort of like snap and move on very quickly, you know, and I think that just sort of like is a
like you
bonus.
could say, we don't need that, let's move on. We have
and
10
I don't
minutes
have to
left.
worry about
But
Alex's feelings. Yeah.
If it's a DP that today's the first time you're working with them and they are suggesting something, you want to be polite.
Right. Exactly. So that was a benefit. Yeah. I mean, I think it continues to be a benefit.
It's going great.
Yeah, it's going great so far. We'll see.
I think directing...
Nothing prepares you for a quarantine, right? Like directing a movie together.
Directing is kind of like lonely on set, as ridiculous as that sounds, because you want to do something and you have like 10 people telling you why you can't do it, you know? And so when you have someone else that's saying, you know what, let's just do it. We'll figure out, we'll get the time back. We'll cut this shot.
Or even, hey, you know what, don't worry, this isn't as important.
That's
mostly
like
what
the
essential thing.
Is this worth fighting for? Or should we let it go? And that's most of the conversations we're having are like, how much does this matter?
Yeah, because sometimes you just get like wound up in a detail. Like myself specifically, I feel like I would get wound up in a detail, and then just having someone else to either be like, no, that is important. We have that. Of course, it's essential. Or just to be like, let's let it go.
There's so many benefits to co-directing, and it changes the whole thing. And I think you can't really even like quantify the just like how helpful it is to have two people collaborating on a job that is fucking impossible.
It's like,
can I ask you two questions related to that? Because there's really only one well, there's a few drawbacks to co-directing, but there's one like very incredibly obvious one, which is, I guess my first question, and you can tell me if you can't answer this, but were you paid to direct this movie?
Yeah, we got some money. I mean, not a lot, and we're deeply in debt now because it wasn't like essentially a living wage for a whole year.
It was less than we'd been paid for our freelance work. Paid a lot more.
But so as directors in the budget, you're splitting the one director line?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean, I guess that's kind of how it goes. I mean, it didn't really matter because it was like we were so involved in like the early stages of production, and because I had, like I said, a line producing background, like before we had anyone involved, like I was making budgets just for my own sanity to just know like roughly how much is this going to cost, like what do we need, and so I was very involved in that, and so we knew, there's a number, and we didn't want to take any more than that number because we wanted it to go on to the screen, and it's like if we get paid anymore, that's just going to come out of somewhere else. So
and almost everybody
very small,
got paid the same rate.
For sure.
Almost everybody got paid the same rate, so we got the same.
Well, I mean,
but we did a lot more work.
Right? We got a project fee that when you like spread it out over how long we worked. Yeah.
But so now that you've made this movie as a directing team, and let's say someone else says, "Oh, we loved Save Yourselves. We're doing an episode of Black Mirror meets High Maintenance. We're merging these two shows with a little bit of glow, a little bit of search."
I'd watch it.
And they want to hire you to direct. They ostensibly would. Well, I guess.
I think that show is called Room 104.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, Room 104.
I think that is
a directing contract is like a one fee for both of us. So yeah, in that way we're splitting it. But like, it's aside from Save Yourselves, which is a very like low budget affair. When you get beyond that and into like the real world of directing, it's a nice amount of money to be splitting. It's like not a problem.
And it seems like people take into account that there's two of you.
Right.
You don't get as much. You don't get twice as much as a single director, which I think is fair.
Totally.
Because you're not doing the same amount of work.
In theory, do two jobs at the same time by kind of trading off, right? Which I think is the advantage. Like there is a little bit less work if you have somebody else covering for you. Like for instance, and I wanted to talk about this anyway, about the writing of the script, but I think Alex said something in the production notes that was incredibly offensive, which was that when you're co-writing a script with someone, you can take a nap and the script still gets written.
That's right.
That's how we worked mostly.
It's huge.
Yeah. I mean, that's a funny anecdote that is true, but it's, I mean, the point being that like, you do kind of lose steam when you're just working on a thing by yourself, and it's nice to like have someone else kind of like moving the train forward, like and the script gets written faster in that manner for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Can I know we're kind of going in reverse order, but I just want to, only because I think Matt and I are both working on projects that have some similarities to your project. So I'm curious personally, when Eleanor, you came from this shorts dramatic background. Alex, I think according to the production notes, you had never written a feature before. When you guys sat down, you had this log line, you had this concept, you had kind of a tone in your mind. Did you like break out Save the Cat and like do the beats? Like here's act 1, here's act 2. What was the process of like coming up with the story? Because even though it's like super naturalistic and funny and relatable, there, like you said, it is plotty and there is kind of this structure that is
it's got that Hollywood entertainment value that keeps that's designed to like keep an audience engaged, right? Like it's plotty, it moves,
So we wrote the script, we outlined it in 2 or 3 days. We wrote the first draft in about 2 weeks. It was
Ooh, why so fast?
We went on a
lightning struck.
We were
well, he says we outlined it in 2 or 3 days, which is true in terms of what we physically wrote down on 2 note cards, but the like 4 or 5 months before that we had been talking about it. So there was a lot of that and like writing down notes in my cell phone, and it's fun. We took ourselves on a little writing retreat to write it, free from distractions. And, but, of course we had cell service and internet and everything. We're not crazy.
We had a little bit of Wi-Fi.
But
Did you think about turning it off?
No.
Like, you're like, well, we're writing a movie.
No, never.
We went to Portugal. We didn't have cell service. We had a little bit of Wi-Fi.
We also didn't have
we got rid of our apartments in New York, and we were nomads for 9 months. And part of that was 2 weeks It was
I know,
not,
it was only
not
supposed to be a
planned.
couple months, and then it just continued because we were both doing like different travel jobs and whatever. Like it just kept being like there was a travel job in the future, and it's like, okay, well, why get an apartment now when we can just keep writing this out? So we took ourselves to Portugal because Alex's mum's friend had a condo there that we could rent that was cheaper than New York rent,
Like
and
way cheaper.
And I had like a bunch of frequent flyer points saved up from
we
travel
had done
jobs.
we had
so
done a job together. We don't have to go too much into this, but we had done a travel job together about urban parks for a nonprofit, and we had saved up a little bit of money.
No, it was points. Like
travel
we
points.
basically,
Yeah.
like,
So we got
flew
free
to
flights and stuff.
Yeah. So it sounds like we did this glamorous thing, but it was not. It was just like the cheapest
It was
option,
awesome, but it
and
was not
great.
Glamorous.
So we stayed in this little condo to write the script, and
So 2 weeks, but we wrote.
so that was the amount of time we were in Portugal. So we knew we wanted to get a first draft out, which was very bad, but it was just like
it was finished.
a first draft that was,
And we got to the end.
yeah, it was just.
Did you have like an
achievement.
arbitrary number of scenes that you wanted to write?
No.
Like when you say you wrote on note cards, was it like 50 note cards? Like what's
I still don't know how many
I don't
scenes it takes to
remember.
make a movie. Like
Yeah.
the
Honestly, like we wrote out all the notes out of my phone, being like, "Oh, we'll just put these on note cards and we'll fill in the gaps, and it'll probably like amount to a movie." And we wrote out all the note cards, and it was like 25 like stupid little scenes about relationships, and we're like, "Oh fuck, this is not a movie." Like we actually have to do some work here.
It's just colors.
It's
just fun
silly,
details.
silly little details.
But the first draft we wrote, it just came like. I'd say like we did look at Save the Cat. We didn't look at it though until we were months into it, maybe even like over a year or something.
Right, it was more like just to check in to see how
it was
we were
like, how'd we
doing.
do? And we did naturally, I think this is pretty common, like pretty well. And we went through Save the Cat, and then we ended up like flipping two scenes in the third act, and it fixed it.
Yeah, it did, yeah. But I think those things are certainly very useful, and we're open to like, kind of using those types of like storytelling structures. It was just, I think when you're trying to get a first draft out, it's maybe a little bit more freeing to avoid that and then check back in and fix it afterwards if you need to. But
because it's just
like, do you think of milestones? Like this is where they go on the journey, and then this big twist happens in the middle, and then they are trying to figure out how to get out of here at the end, like stuff like that. We really
didn't in the first draft. I think now, like that we've written that and we're like working on writing other things, we think more about in terms of act structure and what's the midpoint and, these kinds of things. But in Save Yourselves, we didn't. It did kind of naturally lend itself to that type of structure, just given that it is kind of a plotty movie.
Yeah.
It kind of just worked out that way.
I mean, there's that obvious thing of like, well, the sci-fi element it's real life, it's normal life, and then something happens to make it more sci-fi, right? Aliens arrive, and then they figure out that aliens are here. So what do? And then that one thing doesn't work. What's the next thing they do? Like it feels there's a logic to it.
It moves,
I guess.
yeah.
One of the questions we had a lot for a long time was how long do we let them be oblivious before we kick the movie into action? And early on we were like, well, we can't, like the log line is that they're unaware of the plot of the movie. so like we're like, how long can we sit in that? And then figuring that out was important piece.
Yeah, right.
Did you look at other films as reference points as well? Like, because there's like that genre element, like I kept thinking about Shaun of the Dead a little bit,
But there's a little Spielbergian feel to it too. Like if you think of like just the hints that you're dropping before the characters know what's happening and stuff.
Definitely.
I mean, all of that stuff was an inspiration, I would say. But in terms of the actual writing of the script, I don't know that we were like studying other movies. It was more like when we got into like shooting it and how do we want this to look that we started kind of like doing a little bit more homework on what we're referencing.
There are certain like touchstones that movies do, and we were referred to a bunch of like Attack the Block. People were like, you got to watch Attack the Block. So we watched that, and then there's Shaun of the Dead came up a bunch, and there's other movies that people say to watch, and there's certain things in most movies that happen that are like these touchstones that you think about, and we sort of didn't do. we sort of did the opposite, or like we did like they wouldn't figure it out version of it. Because in most movies, like the main characters figuring stuff out is really exciting and interesting. And we were just like, let's not do that at all.
Yeah.
Just miss that entirely.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But you almost acknowledge it in the movie with your characters saying, like, if these are real aliens, they're not going to be thinking the way the aliens in movies think.
Exactly.
Right. We just wanted to have fun with this idea of like this, once they know what's going on with the alien invasion, it's like 3 days. And it's like, how would anyone like planet Earth is not going to fix this problem in 3 days, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
we got no shot.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the look. I thought it was beautifully photographed. Did you have rules for the aesthetics that you set for yourself to kind of guide you, especially when you had to kind of adjust for weather and whatnot?
yeah. It's funny that you mentioned Albert Brooks.
Yeah,
I mean,
Albert Brooks was
James Brooks.
James Brooks and Albert Brooks were big references. And then that like classic comedy look where things feel really real and a little sentimental and a little, I don't know, artful is the right, like we were trying to, we weren't just, there was an option to shoot this movie with like two handheld cameras, let them go a little free and follow the comedy. But we were just like, no, we want to shoot these like nice frames and let stuff play out, let them like leave the frame and come back in. Like that, we had a lot of rules for stuff. And then it kind of changed. Like we did start doing some more Spielberg-y stuff about halfway through when they're learning about things, and we wanted to play up the mystery of things. So the camera changes to do that.
Can you give us an example of a Spielberg-y thing?
Oh, yeah.
That you did?
Yeah.
I think this is our like one big Spielberg moment that we consider to be our Spielberg. But when when Sue like discovers the hole in the sourdough starter and in the whiskey bottle, and they both kind of like lean in and look at the bottles, and then you see, you know, like,
Yeah, it's like is it a low dolly push?
it's a
In my memory, it is, but we did not. It's on sticks.
But it's a zoom.
But from the Raiders of the Lost Ark, when he switches out the thingy, the gold thingy, like we were doing that shot, but just less expensive.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and we had no space.
It's the same camera angle, but not the same. Like that one had the dolly move. And, yeah.
But that kind of thing. And we
like
just,
that.
but I mean, all of the references were really like, you know, 90s and prior that we were going for, because we liked the idea of making something feel kind of like slightly nostalgic and just in like a feeling, like not too like throwbacky obvious,
Right.
like, but just kind of have that like comfort of nostalgia around it, both in the rom-com setting and the sci-fi.
Yeah, when you're making a movie about technology in modern days and like literally browser tabs and whatnot, it seems like you could offset that with like a more classic visual storytelling.
Yeah.
That was the idea. We didn't want to show any phone screens, and we didn't do like, you know, motion
Text on
graphics
screen
or of the text and stuff like that, which all could have been like, this movie could have done all those things, but we just didn't want to.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, like it still feels tactile.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the idea. And that's why the poof was a real
poof.
The alien was a real.
Is that an IKEA poof, or is that more a CB2 type of
Yeah.
thing? I've been looking for one.
Inspired by all those things, but we physically made that poof.
Yeah, Eleanor handmade.
Oh, wow. Is that human hair?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's my hair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are a few scenes where you do handheld. What was your rule for like
Yes.
when to go handheld?
That was really fun, actually. Like because our DP Matt is very good at that type of stuff of like sort of just following the action in this crazy way. And I think like actually my favorite shot in the whole movie is when the scene where they pull the truck that they find up to the house, and like they get out of the car, and you see sort of like follows Jack and then follows Sue, and then like followed back to Jack, and you see his reaction, and it's like just so beautifully following them. And also our first AC was like just so precise. I can't believe how well he like managed all of that.
Yeah, I love it. I remember that shot. It does have that like Edgar Wright precision of like, you just happen to be looking at the right place at the right time, and because it's handheld, it feels even more like accidentally perfect, you know? So
And there is that thing of like, you know how technically hard it is, so it feels good. It's like something that the
I
audience
think
doesn't
people
really
forget how technically hard handheld action is.
Like chaos, stuff like that.
It's so crazy because it does just look like you were just like winging it, but I mean,
There's like
it's
4
so
people
precise.
trying to make sure that's good.
what camera did you guys shoot on?
It was an Alexa Mini with Primo.
Yeah.
Panavision lenses.
Panavision.
Not anamorphics, no.
No.
Panavision, like most of it's on zooms, actually.
Not that shot, but yeah. Most of it's on zooms.
Yeah, right.
That one's...
There was when we was handheld, it was too heavy to have the big zooms on.
But the idea was like, if we establish this like classic look where we're on sticks the whole time, then by the time things get crazy, you feel it because you're handheld then.
And did you carry a dolly with you the whole time?
No.
Well,
we had
were
a
at
dolly.
one
We had
location,
a
so it was just
right?
in the truck a lot,
Right.
and we used it a couple times.
But we never took it into the woods or anything. We used it a couple of times at the cabin, and
we
it
cut
didn't fit.
We cut it out of the movie in the edit. There were a couple of dolly shots that we cut out.
Yeah, I know. Poor Matt.
Matt was really excited.
It didn't
about
fit in the apartment in Brooklyn, so like of course, like it's so small.
Let alone getting it up the stairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right.
You think about in a one-day shoot, a dolly's kind of like a pain. You got to pick it up. It's heavy. You need a truck for it. It's kind of a little expensive, but on a feature, it's actually pretty inexpensive to just carry the Fischer dolly with you the whole time and just even use it as the tripod.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
we used the slider,
but
a
not
lot.
if you're in crazy locations like the
Right.
woods.
I feel like we use
the slider a bunch.
more than the dolly, and just really like the look was more zooms than it was dolly, I guess, like in terms of like when we were having that type of forward motion.
Yeah, we did a lot of zooms.
We chose
those
zoom
are fun.
over dolly.
The slider's great because you can have it feel locked off, but then you're not just like stuck if the actors move an inch the wrong way, and then you can just like easily shift, and then the shot's good again.
Right.
Well, I guess my big question is, and I didn't know this until this interview, but you live in LA now. This is a very New York movie. It's a very, kind of Brooklynite type of movie in upstate. Why did you come to LA? Does this have to do with like an advancement of your career, opportunities? Like what? I guess we have a lot of filmmakers that listen to the podcast that are mulling over the idea of moving to LA. A lot of them have not had a winning feature out of Sundance or anything.
But yeah, we are constantly asked the question, should I move to LA or not? And we almost always say yes, but those people aren't asking us from New York. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. We moved here actually before we shot the movie.
Right before.
Which was stupid.
We wrote...
Because then we just went back to New York for a whole year.
Yeah.
So we both did the shoot and post in New York. Why did we move here? I don't really... Like we said, we didn't have a home for 9 months. We moved out of our apartments and put everything in storage. And then we were considering getting an apartment again in New York, and Alex sort of wanted to live in LA, and I was like, I don't want to live in LA.
Eleanor did not want to move.
Big New York snob, and I was like, I'm not gonna like it. You have to drive every blah 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 blah. And then we came here in January of the
2017?
year? Yeah, I don't know when it was, but it was January, and it was like 72 degrees and so beautiful. And we were staying at our friend's house who had neighbors that were selling Girl Scout cookies, and it was just, and they have an orange tree, and it was just so nice.
You went to a barbecue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
in January.
You want a portobello?
Lagunitas.
You're vegan, right?
Yeah. So it was honestly kind of like a lifestyle thing, and it was more just like I was burnt out from not having a home from
because we were nomads for 9 months,
and seasons changed in that time. We had to go back into the storage unit and dig out our snow boots, and it was just a sort of pain in the ass. And we were just here, and I started looking at apartments on Craigslist, and we found one, and we were like, should we do it? All right, let's do it. And then we just did it.
This apartment that we're in now is cheaper and bigger than anything that exists in New York.
Yeah.
New York is just a real
I do always warn New Yorkers when they move.
$10,000 a week.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It's
right.
got 1.5 bedrooms.
Yeah.
But you do have to be careful to not get the first place you look at, because you're like, oh my God, this place is incredible. What a steal. You get it before someone figures it out. And you realize that's kind of all apartments.
Everyone in our building
a little bit better.
basically moved here from New York.
Yeah.
I think it's quite funny.
If you move to LA from New York, you're saving money. And if you move to LA from anywhere else, it's insanely overpriced.
Yeah.
Right. But when you were in New York, did you have reps, agents, managers, clients? I know you guys do a lot of some commercial work and branded
support
stuff, right?
system
Music
of
videos.
crews, right? Like I imagine the team
All of
is,
that. We had
more network in New York for sure. And just Alex is an editor, and so he would edit a lot of music videos and commercials, and I was working on commercials and branded content. And for the first year that we lived here, I went back a lot to New York for work because
Yeah.
I didn't have a network here.
Yeah.
Which was whatever, you know.
You come to LA and there's like 100 great editors that do exactly the same thing. And I was like, oh shit.
Yeah.
and know everybody.
Yeah, they already have
Yeah.
great connections. You know,
Yeah.
they're easy to like. They're all like, I think like, oh, I'm easy to work with. Everyone's easy to work with.
I think it's different now, obviously, because you can just Zoom meetings. But it was helpful with the movie and getting the movie made and financed to be here and like be able to take meetings here.
It felt like a leg up to be from LA. So when we went back to New York for meetings, it felt, I don't know, it's such a funny game.
It's smoke and mirrors game, really.
Matt said that yesterday, and I didn't actually believe him. I believe that if you're anywhere else in the country and they're like, oh, this is an LA director, it means something. But in New York, I almost think that's like an insult.
Well, it was
It's not, you're saying.
beneficial. I mean, so we had some meetings here, and actually the cashier who did, you know, were the first financiers in. We met them in LA, even though they are New York based, but whatever. It's just kind of like one of those things, like when we went back to New York to meet with production companies, it was like, they're just here for a week because they're from LA. You have to meet them, you know, like, and I think we got in the door like for a couple of places that we didn't end up working with, but like, you know, all of those meetings are important in one way or another.
The big thing I think between New York and LA is New York has an incredible indie film scene and just like hustle. Like it's just, and it'll just wear you down. We were there for 10 years. And when you're pitching stuff to do, they'll say, cool, can you shoot a web series of this for free first? Or we'll give you $2,000 to shoot this video. And you come to LA and those opportunities I think are less common. And it's more like, we'll give you a proper budget to do this, but most of the time they're not even going to talk to you. So it's like,
but you have to fight against 1,000 people that are really, really talented and also have 2 features.
Exactly. And New York has like the great, I think like a really wonderful comedy scene. Like the art feels a little more important to people there.
I mean, we were both there for 10 years and I think it was like essential to like, you know, who we have ended up as filmmakers.
Like we met Sunitha, like
Al met Sunitha,
all these people in the comedy scene, all these people that showed up in the movie, like Joe Firestone and John Early, like everybody came up in New York.
Both are like incredible and like barely in the
movie.
Well, like one line, like grossly underused.
I saw Joe Firestone's name. I was like, oh, I love her. She's so great. I think she literally has one line.
That's
right?
the thing. That's the thing that we would like to press upon people is even though Joe Firestone, John Early, and Amy Sedaris are in the credits, like you're not going to see Amy Sedaris.
And Ben Sinclair too.
He at least like he at least has like
a
like what you might call a cameo.
Right. Yeah.
The other ones are just like, what the fuck was that? They're in the movie.
I have one selfish question actually that brings us all the way back around, and it has something to do with cast a little bit as well. I am a little curious about how financing came together, right? Because this is the sort of movie that I think we all grow up thinking like we want to make and people aren't making as much of anymore. You know what I mean? Right? Like it's not based on IP. It's got like a cast that's stellar, but they're not quote unquote movie stars the way Brad Pitt is a movie star or something, right?
Right. They're recognizable, but not by name, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a challenge for sure getting it financed because we had never made a feature before. And so like, that's like the first thing is like trying to convince people that you know what you're doing and, you know, you're a worthwhile investment.
Did you make a tone reel or like show your previous work separately?
No, we made a deck that I think was pretty good.
That just like a PDF with images and a plot summary and what the comps are.
And did you have cast already? Did you go personally out to people?
Yeah. So Sunitha, we kind of wrote the script with her in mind. I mean, she didn't know about it at the time, but we did.
Didn't tell her.
And, you know, we sort of wanted to wait till we had it kind of good before we shared it with her and told her that we were thinking of her for it. But so we did share it with her before we went out anywhere. And then we didn't really have any ideas for Jack until someone suggested that we watch Search Party and we saw John and just thought he was like absolutely perfect and we couldn't get him we just couldn't think of anyone else that we wanted much as him.
And then as far as we were concerned, they were locked.
Yeah. So,
but it took us a while
it was sort of funny.
to realize that and communicate that.
Because people, you know, like tell you like, okay, you're going to go into this meeting with these investors, just be open. And we're like, oh, sure. Yeah, we're open. Yeah. And so we'd say like, this is who we're thinking about. And they'd be like, oh, great. Yeah, I love Turin.
We'd love to get this to Channing.
Or whatever. Yeah, we'd love to get this to Channing Tatum. Yeah. And I mean, it was just this sort of like silly thing of like, there was actually a company who did want to make it if we were willing to recast, you know, like,
and they were wonderful.
And they were really smart producers who gave us, you know, like really thoughtful script notes, and like everything else was like really positive.
I want to touch upon that real quickly, actually, because I think that's really fascinating, because you hear the stories of like, oh, studio notes, they want to do this and that or whatever. And you imagine villains. You imagine people who don't love movies, who aren't smart. They like came up loving movies. They're trying to give you the best advice based off of all of their experience, and they're looking out for you, right? And also in this circumstance, recommending the wrong thing for your movie.
Yeah,
so they're looking at foreign sales numbers.
Exactly,
foreign sales.
I mean, that is honestly it.
All about that.
And it's a thing that we struggled with, of course, because we were like, well, we want to make this movie. And, you know, there was like a couple of days where like we had kept sort of going back and forth with them on like, you know, like they would suggest other cast ideas and we'd sort of like ho-hum about it. And then, you know, and we did do like a round of script notes with them that were great notes, and like they're really smart, intelligent people. And then it just got to the point where it was just kind of like, they didn't want to budge on the cast thing. And then we realized we didn't want to budge either. And it was just kind of like...
And we walked away.
It was with no other options. With no other options. And
you had no money at this
point. We had no money.
Even
no
like
money.
Kickstarter.
No. Oh, no.
20,000, nothing.
No.
Yeah,
Zero.
so we were just like, we can't see a way forward with this movie without these two
the only
actors.
way it was going to actually be good was with them.
That was the,
and we're like, why would we
struggle.
make it if it's with?
And
if
also
it's not
because we had already like gotten them excited about it. You know, we'd met John at that point, and he was really excited about working with Sunitha, and it just seemed like this perfect special thing that, you know, like over time we realized we were just not flexible about. Yeah. And so we were like, okay, we'd rather not make this movie than make it with other people. And so that was like it's just the summer before we ended up shooting. And then a couple months later, Alex's agent introduced us to Keshet, and they also passed in our first meeting based on foreign sales.
Which is it's a great story. And Adi is totally fine with us talking about this. I think we met Adi, who is now a dear friend and our producer, and she met us kind of cold, and she like we didn't.
She didn't know too much about the project or whatever.
I think usually the first time you meet an Israeli, it's pretty.
Totally.
She was like, just tell me about the project, and we told her about the project, and she listed like a bunch of reasons why they could not do it. Like, just like, we can't do it. There's the cast, foreign sales, blah, 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 blah. It's not genre enough. Or I don't even know if she said that, but that was something we heard from many other companies.
Right. Other people wanted to turn it into a horror film because that would be more sellable or whatever.
Kill some more people, maybe a flying saucer or two.
Yeah.
And then 3 months later or 6 months later.
No. You're missing an important detail in the meeting. Alex,
this isn't good advice.
No, it's not good advice, but it's funny. But Alex by this point had just kind of gotten like a little bit like agitated by the whole like financing meeting things, and I was still like, be very nice to these people, you never know. But Alex, like in the meeting, was just like, but what if it's a good script? And I was like, Alex,
I was so mad about the metrics.
Like, she's being very generous, telling us like
people
these
cared
nice
about.
things. And
had she read the script?
I don't think she had. No. So anyway, like, a couple months go by, and then Adi emailed us and was like, I can't stop thinking about it. And now when she tells this story to people, she always like mentions like, and then Alex said, but what if it's a good script? And I couldn't get that out of my head. And I just was like, you know what? He's right. And I was like, God damn it.
Not good advice.
But this arrogance like actually paid off in that moment.
Write that down. Yeah. Say that in a meeting.
What if it's a good script?
Say my script is good. Yeah. It always works.
I think there is something to being willing to say, this is what my movie is. Like, if you don't want to be a part of it, that's okay. You've already walked away before, right? The worst thing is that you don't have the movie at the end. You don't have it right now, right? So I think there is something to take away from that that's maybe a little hard to swallow sometimes, but really.
Yeah, I mean, we realized like just, looking back on how it all played out and that it did work out, it was like obviously a very good decision in the end to stick with John and Sunitha and stick with how we wanted to make the movie. And I think that's like, when you're making your first movie, it's so important to do it the way you want to do it, because it's your first opportunity to sort of like say to the world, like, this is what I like, and this is like what's going to be good about what we can do. And if you're compromising already on your first movie, then I don't know, sort of setting it up for things to go
I don't know.
bad.
I go back and forth because you could also just knock something that's not totally you out of the park and then progress like any number of people have done.
Sure.
The thing is, like, I don't know, it seems like the only thing worse than like trying to get your movie made is like getting your movie made and having it be a fucking disaster.
Yeah.
Because like you don't like it, or the actor isn't what you thought, or like it's just like that is a true nightmare. And like not having a movie and grinding it out doing freelance work is still like a totally fine.
I've told this story before on the podcast, but I made this feature, and it's a biopic. It's about a wrestler that's deaf, based on this true story, and it's kind of like Rudy meets Ray. It's like a sports film about someone with a disability, and it did well. I mean, it played theatrically, premiered at AFI, got good reviews, won awards and things. But then after that, and I got repped and everything. And I really wanted to make, like, my favorite movie was at the time of all time was like Fight Club. And I wanted to make a movie like that. And everyone I met with was like, you made this, that like, if you want to do a sports family film, we can talk about it. But if you want to make Fight Club, go make Fight Club and show us that you can make Fight Club, and then we'll get you next. So I do think, kind of to Eleanor's point, like, your movie, if you want it to be any sort of currency for your next job, it needs to be similar to what you want your next job to be, even if you blow it out of the park.
Which is
what we're fighting against
silly.
Right now.
Yeah.
I guess
it is a silly thing, but it is like so true.
Oh no, I just mean it in terms of we have like some fun things lined up that we can't talk specifics on, but like the the things that we do get sent are like
it's phone stuff.
It's phone stuff, or it's like there's a couple and it's in space, or and it's funny to us, like the narrow-mindedness of Hollywood. It's at times. Well, I mean, look, to be fair, as I said, we are working on other projects with other companies that are very exciting to us, and that does not fall into this category. But it's funny because it's like we just did that. We don't want to do couple sci-fi like comedy again.
It's a body swap sci-fi comedy.
Yeah,
a millennial Brooklyn couple.
Yeah,
slam dunk.
Yeah.
Well, so obviously COVID, I'm sure, affected everything, but you did premiere at Sundance this year, pre-COVID. And you said you have some other projects lined up, but you win Sundance, it's your first feature, or did you sell out of Sundance?
Yeah.
Sort of, yeah. But like 2 weeks later or something.
Oh, yeah. But we were talking to them. I mean, we were talking to them.
So you make a splash for sure at Sundance. And then are you still editing and line producing?
We got back in
time writing?
We had gotten.
How do you guys make money?
We were coming off the movie. We were incredibly broke. So we got back into, like, I was editing.
I did one shoot, before COVID.
February. We worked in February, and then lockdown happened. Yeah. Sundance is in January. We worked in February. And then
thank God we worked in February, honestly, because like now, my backup job isn't a job.
Can't do
either anymore right now. So
we were living off of COVID cash.
Yeah. But no, I mean, it was obviously very weird timing to be trying to release a movie during this time. But also, as I'm sure you guys know, it's a nice time to be writing, and so
also,
you kind of
there's a lot of sourdough in your movie.
That was such a weird thing.
It must have been a treat, right? To be like, hey, this kind of cultural moment does line up with a kind of a plot point in your movie, right?
It's probably the opposite, right? Every time you see sourdough mentioned, you're like, this is diluting the value of
Other way around.
There's a couple of things we were worried about people getting, and one was like, he says, my sourdough starter.
Yeah,
it's like
is anyone
I didn't even know what that
is?
was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So now, thank God, people know what it is.
Yeah.
I learned about that there's a tie into ethanol with sourdough starter, which I didn't know before the movie.
Yeah.
A lot of good
small
a lot of good science stuff in the
Well, so now what's like, if people want to find out more about you guys, are you now a team officially? Like, do you have like an EA sport
Yeah.
type of Instagram channel or anything?
No. We have a desire to continue to work together and also do our own things still.
Eleanor's got some movies she's writing on her own, directing projects. I almost always co-direct. So like I said, I made a movie with my friend Rachel. We're working on another movie.
Well, awesome. Well, are you guys down to join us for an unpaid endorsement?
Oh yeah, go for it.
Unpaid endorsements.
So I'm going to endorse two things. One, because we have a couple on the podcast. It just reminded me, have you guys heard Team Deakins?
Yes, we
podcast
listened
at
to
all?
that. It's so good.
So I did not realize at all that Roger Deakins and his wife were a cinematography team. I always, Roger Deakins kind of gets all the credit. He's nominated for the Oscar and everything. But the DP that I worked with was telling me about the podcast. And I said, oh, so is it Roger Deakins interviewing people? And so he told me, well, no, Roger's wife usually is kind of hosting the podcast and Roger kind of just adds in color and stuff and some stories. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Is she also into cinematography? And he's told me that she travels with him and like she kind of like heads the cinematography. She's like the cinematography producer of sorts on set. So if any department's like, what camera are we shooting on? What lenses or what shot are we doing on this day? They'll ask her and she'll tell them the answer. And if it's something they need to talk to Roger about, then she will connect them. But she goes on all the scouts. She goes to all the meetings.
Does she wear the same outfit every day as well? That's the real question. Because Roger Deakins, he wears the same thing. It's like I think it's a
ripped
denim
that off
shirt
from
or
Mark
something.
Zuckerberg, though.
Yeah,
That's what actually Connor does too. The DP from Snowy Bing Bongs, she wears a jumpsuit, the same jumpsuit, and she's like, then I don't have to think about it.
Great idea.
Oh, that's cool. But yeah, so it's just kind of delightful, the idea that even a cinematographer who's kind of largely known on their own can be part of this husband and wife team that is running the show together. And I assume when you're the cinematographer on 1917 or Blade Runner or something like that, it doesn't hurt to have another person on your team managing basically these gigantic productions, these hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's fun. Check it out, Team Deakins. And then my other endorsement is kind of silly, but there's this place in Hollywood, Freestyle Photo. Do you guys know that place? It's on Sunset Boulevard.
It's kind of like one of the last places you can like get Super 8 developed or whatever.
Yeah, developed and printed. But they also have like expendables, which, if you're doing kind of DIY stuff at home, or if you happen to be married to an actor that gets auditions a lot on tape, two things I get from there is bounce boards for like $5. You get like amazing foam core, and it's in Hollywood. A lot of the other film supply places are not in Hollywood, like Studio Depot and stuff are in the Valley. So if you just need a bounce board real quick, it's a great place to go. And then I also, you guys can't see from this angle, but I have like a backdrop that I think I might have talked about before. But if you go to this place, there's this company, Savage, and they pretty much have every single color at Film Supply, and you can get like an 86-inch roll. And Matt's looking at me like I'm an idiot because I've said this exact endorsement probably like 2.5 years ago. But we
like
just
6 months ago, guys. It's 6 months tops.
We just got blue, which we got gray originally, which was like kind of a mistake. And I do, every casting office in the world has like a blue wall, and it's because
it makes you look good.
Human skin, that whole blue orange thing, right?
We have a blue seamless roll in our closet, I think.
Yeah,
from a shoot.
We have a lot of gear.
Good to know. Maybe we should put it behind us for Zoom calls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so for Zoom calls, you can change the background.
Yeah.
It's like a blue screen.
Exactly.
Yeah. There you go.
That's all I got. Okay, Eleanor, Alex, who wants to go first?
My endorsement is short. I was going to endorse composting.
Heck yeah. LA Compost.
We've been going to LA Compost to drop off our compost, and it's cool. They send you an email telling you like your impact.
There's still a little New Yorker left in you.
Yes, I used to drop it off at the farmer's
rooftop
market.
gardens.
Yeah, exactly. Silly thing, but it's so easy. Just keep your scraps in your freezer and then drop it off at the farmer's market or at the place in Elysian, or I'm sure at whatever city you live in, you can figure it out. But it's just a little thing you can do, and it feels great.
There are a lot of lines in Save Yourselves that are funny, but they are true to our real lives. So when Jack in the first scene is like, one of the biggest problems right now is food wastage. It's funny in the movie because he's such a dope, but that's true. And we are worried about that. So LA Compost is great, and they're trying to get so many people doing it that they can get like become part of the local government, and
that'd be great.
Would be nice.
What's your
Wait,
endorsement?
so you take your food scraps like old lettuce or something, or like orange peel?
all of
yes,
it,
all
yeah.
that stuff.
All that stuff.
They just make dirt out of it with
you
worms.
put them in your freezer.
Eggshells, bro. Coffee grinds. Anything that's kind of stinky.
Yeah.
I keep it we keep it in the freezer so that it doesn't stink up the kitchen.
'Cause
And then you just take it frozen.
It takes up half.
And then do they pay you for it or anything?
No, you
don't,
pay
no.
them.
What do you get
You
from
don't pay
it?
them yet.
Well, you
give them
donate
tip.
a buck or two.
You don't have to, but you can because it's for a good cause. But they do give you free like little starter plants sometimes, like little mini lettuce or a little mini oregano.
They'll give
or
you free
something.
stuff.
Alex, what's your
Mine?
endorsement?
Joe Pera's show, Joe Pera Talks with You, is the best show on television, and it's one of the best examples of stand up turned into a show like after Seinfeld. It's like it's or maybe Everybody Loves Raymond. It's incredible.
It's also on HBO Max now.
Exactly. Thank you for saying.
Really?
Because for a while you had to watch it.
Old episodes?
Both seasons are
Or
on
is
there.
it still being made?
They did. There's two
it's 2
seasons
seasons, yeah.
that they've made, and they're gonna. I believe they're gonna shoot.
Are they?
I don't think it's stopped.
Oh, I don't know.
I haven't heard that it stopped. It's just a wonderful show. I think everyone should
I
know
love
about
that
it.
show very, very much as well. And Joe Firestone, just to bring it all back, Joe Firestone's character is a prepper in that show. And I was watching it right before COVID broke out. And between that and a job almost getting canceled because of COVID, I was like, oh, this is real. And I went out and bought a bunch of
Did you
stuff.
buy a gun?
Did you buy a gun?
No. I when I say stuff, I mean like
Canned
a lot
food.
of pasta
Yeah.
sauce.
Pasta sauce and beans.
But dude, the gun scene in their movie, Matt,
Oh, yeah, it's good.
The gun debate.
Yeah,
That's the one I
another
related
real
to
the most.
statistics
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
of Matt a lot.
Yeah. I would be like, I'm not going to use
I
this
mean, just
at all,
every
for
day
sure.
that we had the gun on set, I was like, I didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
Like we, you do these like safety meetings or whatever. And Nicole, our property master, would be like, now, would anyone like to inspect the gun? And I'd be like, yes, thank you very much. I would like to inspect that gun. And I had no idea what I was looking for. And I
Nobody
just
else
look at it
cares.
and be like,
It's like a
very
magic
good.
show.
That appears to be
And
a
we
gun.
had already inspected the gun weeks ago when we picked the gun. We knew it was not real. It was really
but
funny.
it just even having a fake gun on set makes me so nervous. I hate guns.
Yeah. And Joe Firestone open carries a gun, and it's really
It's so
funny,
funny,
in
Joe
the
Pera
Joe
show.
Pera show. It's just
just
like
so
not
tiny.
acknowledged at all. She just like opens her button down, and then you see an open carry like a pistol, and it's so funny.
Matt, can you beat all four of these?
My endorsement, I've got one that I think is thematically on point. It's a YouTube video essay from the Royal Ocean Film Society, which is, like your lessons from the screenplay or every frame of painting, like kind of there's that whole crop of like YouTube video essays from, precocious film students. This one's really great, and it's called How Peter Jackson Made a Splatter Masterpiece, and it's about the making of Bad Taste. That's really great. And I didn't realize Bad Taste is Peter Jackson's first movie. He dropped out of high school, started working in like a film development, house. I can't remember what they call it. It's not even that he's literally developing photographs. It's like it was back in the day when you needed to like deal with like basically like photocopies before photocopies were a real thing. There wasn't really like a huge like film scene in New Zealand at the time, and he made this movie on weekends with the money he made on his day job. For 3 years. It started as a short and slowly evolved into a feature film that launched his career, and then he made a bunch of Lord of the Rings movies and stuff. But it's super gory, it's super gross, really funny, and like very DIY. Like there's like footage of him showing how he will do like a bit where someone puts a machete in somebody's head, and he shows the literal cardboard machete with like tubing for blood that he has in his garage. So it's very charming. It's nice and short, but it's called How Peter Jackson Made a Splatter Masterpiece by the Royal Ocean Film Society.
Pretty sure that's called a splatter piece.
Well,
Splaster piece.
that's what the comment section is for, Oren. Well,
You can meet me there at the
I really
comment.
appreciate the people who make film essays on YouTube. I think that They're doing God's work.
We wish it really good.
What a great way to procrastinate. Right?
Keep our craft alive, please.
Well, Alex and Eleanor, this was so wonderful. The movie is Save Yourselves. I think it'll be out on VOD by the time this episode drops. If not, keep an eye out for it soon. We'll set it up in the intro. But you can check out the trailer at the very least and links to the movie in the description at justshootitpod.com if you want to learn more about the things that we talked about. Do you guys have Twitter handles or anything?
Follow Sunitha and John.
Yeah, follow Sunitha Money and John P. Reynolds.
Yeah.
Right. And Save Yourselves movie.
Well, like I said, you can check out all the stuff we talked about at justshootitpod.com. We are on social media at justshootitpod, and I'm at Mr. Matt Enlow.
I'm at O Kaplan on Instagram. I'm at SmiteyPyleg on Twitter. And if you want to ask us any questions, you can email us at justshootitpod@gmail.com. This episode was edited by Sarah Weirda. Our social media manager is Derek Aiello. Our webmaster is Ewan Williams. And the music you're listening to is from the Free Music Archive and the artist Jahzzar. And we'll catch you next time. Thanks.
That's everything. Thanks, everyone.